Uh, Hello all. I hesitated to make this video because it felt a bit like political posturing or moral grandstanding or something. But for some time now, I've felt that circumstances demand a response and an appeal. Um, at the very least, they demand that I and anyone of conscience cease to remain passive observers of what's unfolding before us. Myself, I have enjoyed a considerable degree of comfort and prosperity and liberty uh, through no virtue of my own. It is because of people who came before, who gave their lives, their blood, their sweat to the cause of freedom, and I am a tremendous beneficiary of their toil and their suffering. So I'm obligated to say something and to do more. I am not an expert in government. I am not an expert in law or much of anything, really. What I am is a student of history. So this is a historian's take on the current situation. Now it's getting late, but I knew I had to do this today because it's March 15th. It's the Ides of March. It marks a very solemn occasion. For those of you who don't know, on this day, 2069 years ago, a tyrant met his end on the cold stone floor of the Senate building of Rome. His name was Julius Caesar. Now, for years, decades even, senators and other concerned parties had watched with growing anxiety as Caesar deftly maneuvered himself through the gauntlet of Roman politics to attain unprecedented and unmatched power. He consolidated his control in three main ways, in three main areas. First, in politics, through bribery, through blackmail, through strategic alliances. Second, more importantly, in the military, he cultivated a loyal following amongst his troops until they were willing to follow him anywhere, even through an ocean of their own countrymen's blood. And finally, most importantly, control over the narrative. Caesar wrote relentlessly about his achievements, about the conniving of his enemies, and he was an amazing orator to boot. The man just never shut up. On top of this, he championed a lot of reforms to help poor classes, the common people who were struggling economically a great deal at the time. And this combined to cement him in the eyes of the people as their champion, as the man who would save them from decades of instability, of war, and poverty. Many have since credited Caesar with the death of the Roman Republic. The truth is more complicated. The truth is the Republic, like Caesar himself, was not killed by one man, but by many, many wounds. Before Caesar, Pompey Magnus and Crassus used corruption and military intimidation to bend the Republic to their will. Before them, the tyrant Sulla infamously was the first Roman general to march his armies against the capital. And before them all, the Senate itself, a body composed almost entirely of nobility, abused and leveraged the system to enrich themselves even further. For example, while hundreds of thousands of farmers were sent off over the centuries to fight Rome's relentless expansionary wars, the senators and their cronies would buy up all this farmland and create these massive estates, where then everyone had to work on those estates because it was the only place to work, and they were of course working for significantly smaller wages, and many of the people working there were slaves. So upon their return, imagine this, upon their return, surviving veterans would find their livelihoods gone or else squeezed completely dry by the insatiable greed of impossibly wealthy men. After being paraded in magnificent triumphs through the streets of Rome, the gold and valuables and slaves taken from conquered nations, they would go on to fund the building of great public works, of popular food programs and welfare programs, but never enough to stave off the burdens of poverty that all of this expansion had created. So after bleeding for their country to bring it glory and prosperity, soldiers and citizens alike found that they could share in none of it. It wasn't meant for them, it was meant for a privileged few. Many people interpret the people's throwing their support behind Caesar as them betraying the Republic. That's not the case. The truth is, the Republic betrayed them. It abandoned them until eventually they gave their support to the men who destroyed it forever. Now, none of this, thankfully, is relevant today unless we were living in a time where vast exponential wealth was being funneled away from the broader public and into an increasingly unreachable upper crust. Unless, of course, we were living in a system where the public good was being consistently undermined by private interests. Unless, of course, we were living in a time when the failures of the state had eroded people's trust in its institutions. Unless, of course, we were living in a time when the well-earned mistrust of people was being weaponized against their own interests by reality-bending narratives. Unless, of course, we were living in a time when populist personalities were consolidating control over the government, over media, over the economy, and over the military. But I don't need to tell you, we are living in those times. Now, to be clear, analogy is never totally accurate. America is not Rome. Okay? America is not Rome. Any historian will tell you history may rhyme, but it does not repeat. America is not Rome. Our leaders are, for now, popularly elected. Our military is, for now, subject to civilian control. Elections are, for now, not subject to mass tampering and intimidation. Our citizens enjoy more rights and protections than did the Romans, for now. And for now, we still have the knowledge and power to avoid the Romans' fate. But time is against us. In scarcely more than a month, the new administration has ushered in an earth-shifting new agenda that has thrown the future of the nation and the free world into doubt. Our independent agencies, which, in spite of their flaws, have kept the most powerful of society and government in check, are being systematically and illegally gutted. The safety nets, which have, if imperfectly, given millions of the most vulnerable in society a lifeline of necessary services, are in danger of being abolished with absolutely nothing in place to take up that burden. The rules and norms which that have limited the darkest ambitions and defined our civil society have been desecrated and ground to dust. The Congress that was meant to be the sole engine of legislation, where every state and district, every constituency has its voice, has ceded by the narrowest of majorities this authority to the president. The courts that were meant to impose the rule of law and check the excesses of the other branches have, like Congress, exempted themselves from basic ethical obligations imposed on even minor federal workers, and have kneecapped every meaningful attempt to hold the executive accountable. Our free press, once the envy of the world, has deteriorated from a combination of changing markets, changing technologies, bad incentives, and bad actors. Where it once illuminated our discourse, it now only muddies it. Where once it guided debate with shared, reliable facts, it now only offers innumerable competing narratives. No more can the Fourth Estate reliably hold governments or corporations accountable because there is no faith in its collective reliability. Effectively, the Fourth Estate is, if it's not dead, it's headless. And then there's the executive. So, since Vietnam, the public's trust in the American presidency has declined precipitously, and with good reason. Even with the post-Watergate reforms, the chief executive powers have only grown by degrees. Unilateral decrees and military actions and executive orders have become more and more common. And even universally reviled abuses and mistakes cannot translate to accountability, even after the occupant has left the powers of the office behind. So a high-powered, high-stakes position only held by a single individual from a single party for years at a time in an era where truth has become relative, has naturally become one of the most controversial positions in the Union. So in this maelstrom of desperation and mistrust, many have begun looking to the imperial powers of the American presidency as a path to salvation, for themselves, or for their ideals, or for the republic. At present, this is the single greatest threat of all. A wildfire of cynicism has spread across the world's greatest republic, burning away all faith in the power of civil discourse and independent checks, and in favor of unilateral executive force. And now I'm going to talk about this administration specifically. Not only has this administration wielded powers with unfucking precedented latitude, but it has done so in a manner that is callous, capricious, and careless in the extreme. This administration is in my opinion, the hideous culmination of decades of disingenuous posturing and vapid culture warring. Whereas this manifested in the left as a pervasive intolerance for other opinions, a stifling puritanization of political discourse, a balkanization of the left's traditional bases of support, and a broad, pervasive misrepresentation of what the other side actually thinks and acts. Unfortunately, the right wing has by now far eclipsed even the most egregious transgressions of cancel culture or woke intolerance. All right. They have cheaply scapegoated society's most vulnerable groups, often without even the slightest cause or provocation. They're eating the cats and dogs. He said that in a debate when he felt cornered. For no reason, he out of the blue threw an entire group of people who had done nothing to him or to anyone under the fucking bus with zero goddamn evidence. They have lied deliberately, compulsively, and erratically and fucking incessantly. And they have leveraged popular mistrust and changing media infrastructure to create an industry of propaganda and obfuscation. And it has destroyed the capacity for fact-based public discourse and mortally wounded the foundations of our civil society. They have demonstrated every contempt for the rule of law, selectively pardoning violent criminals, drug dealers, and highly corrupt public officials who support them, while maligning and weaponizing law enforcement against all opposition, be they minor offenders, such as people who are here who have simply overstayed their visa, which, as far as crimes go, is on the level of speeding, by the way. It's not a criminal offense. They might legally change that pretty soon, but it has not been a criminal offense. They have usurped Congress's powers over spending, illegally withholding funds from educational institutions to pressure them into enforcing their own political whims on the free speech of students and faculty. And they have even gone so far as to withhold emergency relief aid from American citizens in the midst of the single worst wildfire of the century in California, for nothing more than naked political leverage. They have detained legal residents such as Muhammad Khalid without cause, without warrant, in a transparent attempt to normalize the arbitrary exile or imprisonment of dissidents. They have maligned judges for ruling against them, waging war on them in the court of public opinion, and openly suggested and advocated that they should be able to simply ignore court decisions whenever they see fit, which makes the courts just a fucking rubber stamp, basically. Their allies in Congress have not been idle either. They have dutifully towed the party line, fed into his cult of personality, and fallen over themselves to justify every capricious little outlash. And some of them have even gone so far as to propose an end to two-term presidential limits. This would not have been possible even 10 years ago. 15 years ago, it would have been unfucking thinkable. What a difference a decade makes, huh? So I've spent a lot of time with conservatives. All right. I'm not one myself, but I've been hanging out with them since middle school. I went to a military college. Like I was in a platoon. I didn't go into the military, but I was in a cadet corps. I was surrounded by conservatives day in and day out for 4 fucking years. And on the off chance any conservatives are watching this, One, thanks for making it this far. And two, I know you're misrepresented in the media. I know you are, and it's not fair. It's not fair that the left likes to portray that large portions of the left will portray anyone who disagrees with them as a racist. That's not fair. And to people on the left who think I'm being an apologist, I just want you to consider this. The same way it was annoying for conservatives in the Bush era to wrap themselves up in the flag and call anyone who disagreed with the Iraq war a fucking terrorist sympathizer, it's fucking annoying when liberals deck themselves out in the paraphernalia of civil rights and call everyone who disagrees with them a goddamn Nazi. So there's a lot of that going on everywhere. It's a common, cheap political tactic. But we're losing ourselves. To people on the right, if you're a conservative Republican would want to conserve the republic. A conservative Republican would not stand for a fucking instant the idea of a man in the Oval Office wholesale ignoring court decisions. We're a nation of checks and balances. We're a nation of laws, not men. If you believe in small government, this ain't it, guy. A man consolidating control of the government is not the same as making the government smaller and less intrusive. I know a lot of people believe, and rightfully so in my opinion, that the government needs to trim a lot of fat. And you're right, but not all weight loss is equal. If a man chainsaws your legs off, he doesn't get to turn around and go, oh, what a great personal trainer am I. Look at all the weight I helped you lose. No, you're not a personal trainer. You're a fucking psychopath. I mean, what are we doing here, guys? And to be clear, I don't blame people for voting for Trump. I really don't. Especially not after Biden, all right? 4 years of watching a Democratic president get lost on the way to the end of every fucking sentence. Yeah, I don't blame you for voting for Trump. Liberals made themselves pretty fucking annoying. I don't blame you for being annoyed. The economy was not doing so great. I don't blame you for coming to the conclusion that maybe a Republican presidency would be better. A lot of things in the system that have been supported by Democrats and Republicans, one way or another, passively or explicitly, they've been fucking us over in a lot of ways. And I don't blame people for looking to Trump as, a possible solution, even if it's a Hail Mary. People think, well, the system's broken, might as well break it all the way and build it up from scratch. I get that thinking. But it's wrong. It is... I heard someone describe Trump as the wrong answer to the right questions. And I think that's a pretty good descriptor. I don't blame people for thinking crazy, stupid stuff because our information landscape is a cesspool. Nobody knows what to trust or how to verify if something is trustworthy or not. Our education failed us in that respect. They did not teach us accurately how to vet and verify information. So I would say the best way to move forward is if if all of us just your the level of passion you have for something, right? The strength of your opinion on something should be directly proportional to how much you actually know about the topic. You don't have to be an expert in everything. You don't have to research everything. Ain't nobody got time for that. Certainly not me. Certainly not, people who have to work 24/7 just to put food on the table, just to keep the lights on. But if you can learn to withhold judgment when you don't have enough actual information, vetted information, watching a podcast is not research, then we can get through this. If we can learn to forgive each other for being misinformed and for falling for it, because no one was ready for social media. That is a maelstrom of just the pitfalls of human nature. None of us were prepared for it. If we can just forgive each other and then just try to start over from what we know and build off of that, we can learn to trust each other and we can make it through this together. We're all we've got. I believe in this country. I believe in its promise, and I know most people living in it still do. Even if we're all feeling pretty hurt, even if we all feel like that promise has been broken too many times, it's still worth fighting for. And it's worth fighting to make sure that that promise extends to as many people as possible. So, good night. This atheist says God fucking bless. Be seeing you.